Hey friends, welcome back. Today I'm going to be talking about 7 pieces of dating advice, common dating advice that I personally reject. You got to let me know which one you agree with and how you disagree with me in the comments down below, but let's dive in. So some of you know I've been married for just over a year now, but before then I was perpetually single for quite a while. And during that time I got a lot of advice of dating do's and don'ts from both secular friends and Christian friends. So I think this advice is going to be a mix of both Christian advice and non-Christian advice. The first piece of advice or principle in general is you need to date for years. You need to date for years. I've heard this both from non-Christians, but also from Christians as well. I think there's this understanding that unless you're dating for that, 1 year, 2 year, at least a couple years, you really can't get a grasp of what that person really is like. And on the surface, I can understand what they mean, especially in our current culture of dating and how it goes about and how people approach dating in general. Very surface level. You don't really ask the important questions until it gets down to, okay, are we really going to get married, and am I really going to propose, and all this kind of thing. That's when you deal with the tough stuff. But I don't think that this has to be the way it is. I really don't. And the reason I reject it is I think it promotes not being intentional. Like the idea that, okay, well, I'm at least going to date them for 3 or 4 or 5 years even. I've known people 7 or 8 years. And if that's your mindset, then you are in no rush, or you have no interest in dealing with the hard stuff of having the tough conversations, of dealing with where you disagree theologically or life values, or even dealing with past stuff. Like you're not interested in dealing with that because, hey, you're just in the honeymoon phase. You're just enjoying it, which is okay. I understand that. But I believe there needs to be a level of intentionality, and you can apply a level of intentionality that can speed up the process. Like it's okay. If you want to date for 1 or 2 years, I'm not going to say you're doing something wrong. But what I would say is make sure that you're applying intentionality to it. I think when you have the mentality that you're going to be just dating forever, it promotes passivity in men. It promotes passivity in men, not just within secular culture, but also within the church. If a man thinks, okay, well, you know what, I have 5 or 6 years to figure out everything. I'm not really going to put, heart into my career or preparing for marriage or any of this stuff, right? And sure, okay, maybe you're really diligent and you do that anyway. But if you're saying, okay, hey, you know what, I'm going to date this person for 6 months or a year, and then we're gonna get married, and that's gonna be it. Then you're gonna have a fire behind you. You're gonna have a fire behind you to get your life together, to get your finances together, to get your spiritual life together, to really get to know this person. And I'm not saying, hey, you got to marry them at the end of that, but you're having that intentionality to not waste time, to not just fluff around with random stuff that just doesn't matter, but to have that balance of fun, but also intentionality. Hey friends, quick word before we get back into the video. If you want to support what I'm doing here on Men on Mission, I'd encourage you to sign up on Patreon down below. You can get a free copy of my book, A Letter to My Father, What Your Son Wants to Tell You But Doesn't. It's for fathers, it's for sons. I'll send it to you if you're in North America, if you sign up to Patreon today. So I'd encourage you to do that. And now onto the video. The second piece of advice, and I hear this a lot from non-Christians, and it almost seems like a no-brainer to them, is you have to move in with them first. You have to move in with them first. And this is apart from even sleeping with them. You need to move in with them because you need to see, are they annoying to live with? How are they actually in day-to-day life? Can you get along with them? Can you deal with them? Like, these are the things that you need to find out before you get married. To me, this is advice for people that don't have patience and don't have compassion for another person. If you are just in it for yourself, right? And this is how we approach, this is kind of like an overall thing with dating and marriage in general. If you're in it for yourself, if you're in it for what you can get, then yeah, of course you want to see what you're signing up for. You want to see, are they going to annoy me? Do they have a sleep schedule that's going to be bad for me? Like, these are the things that I need to figure out. Meanwhile, I think for the Christian, it's like, okay, number one, I'm not going to move in with them because that's going to promote temptation into areas that I don't want to go, right, as a Christian. But also it's like, hey, regardless of their little quirks or the things that might be difficult to deal with, I can have patience, and those things will actually grow me in maturity and sanctification. Like, that's the benefit of them too. But I think for secular culture, it makes sense that they would want to move in because, hey, this is about me. This is about me having a good life. And if you impede my good life, then I want to get out of this. I don't want to sign the contract before I know what I'm getting into. The third thing, and it kind of goes along with this, is you need to sleep with them. You need to see if you're sexually compatible. This is the language that we hear a lot from secular folks. And I would just dismiss this totally. I would dismiss this totally because, like I said before, if you're in it for your own sexual gratification, if you're in it for what I can get, I need to make sure my needs are met, which is how people approach it, right? That's why you need to make sure you're sexually compatible so I get what I need. I think the Bible really promotes something different within marriage. In Ephesians 5, it talks about how both husband and wife are a picture of the gospel, how the husband lays his life down for the wife as Christ lays his life down for the church. In verse 28, it says, "In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself." In this covenant, you're looking to give. What can I give the person? How can I serve them? How can I look out for their interests beyond my own? Okay, fourth piece of advice, you need to date a bunch of people. You need to date a bunch of people. And I would put a caveat to this. I think there's some understanding like, hey, you need to get, experience with talking to different people and what different people and personalities are like. And I would just say that you can do that by just having friends, by just getting to know people in group scenarios at church, at youth group, at young adults, at these different, conferences and stuff like that. Like, you can understand people, you can form those friendships with boundaries, especially with female friends, right? Like you're establishing those boundaries. But at the same time, it's like, you don't need to date tons of people to understand that this is somebody that you want to marry. I've known tons and tons of people that have only dated one person. And that's great. That's great because they understand their standards. They understand what they're looking for. They don't compromise, and they're not looking to get into it just flippantly. The person that they date, they want to marry. And sometimes things don't work out, right? You date somebody and you think you're going to marry them, and then you find out, or, that somebody's not interested or something's not aligning, and you break up, and that's okay. But I'm just saying that you need to go into it, I think, with some belief that this could be somebody I'm marrying. Like, you don't know, right? But that's what you're engaging in. That's the quest. That's the search. You're like, could this be somebody that I'm interested in marrying? And if it's not, then I don't know why you would proceed in that. And this idea that, okay, well, I'm just going to go from one person to another, to another, to another, just because I need experience in dating people. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It just really doesn't. Number 5 piece of advice, and this might be a little bit of a controversial one, but if you're not happy, you should leave. Okay, now obviously within marriage, as a Christian, I would vehemently disagree with this, right? Just because you're not happy in your marriage at times and seasons doesn't mean that you should leave, right? That, of course not. That's against what God has commanded us. It's very self-seeking, right? But what about in a dating relationship? I would say this, is that there are seasons and there are times that you're just not as happy as a person, and there are difficulties and there are hard things that you need to go through, even as a dating couple, to experience each other, to experience life with each other, that are going to be hard. And does that mean that you just quit? Well, you need to understand the difference between somebody that's gonna basically pull you down, right? Somebody that's really creating these hard times out of their own poor decisions, or their lack of boundaries, or versus life that just gets hard and you feel like, man, this is tough, and maybe I'm not the most happy in this season, and maybe I should just move on to somebody else. I think there's some level of persistence that you need to have if you really want to get married, if you really want to find the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with. You need to say, hey, even in this dating season where, yeah, I guess technically I could break up and I have options and I could go elsewhere, you say, no, I want to persevere through this because this is going to grow us closer together. You need to be discerning about what kind of hardship you're going through, right? Is it life bringing things on you and you're working through them together? Or is it poor decisions that the other person is making that's actually leading your relationship into harm? So I would just say, hey, if you're unhappy, that doesn't mean immediately, okay, break up, that they're not the right person for you. But there might need to be things that need to be corrected, or maybe it's just a tough season that you need to persevere through, and that's going to grow you together as you work your way towards marriage. Okay, piece of advice number 6 goes something like this is since God made them for me, right? If they're the one, then everything will be smooth. It'll just be kind of easy. Everything will fall into place and, our personalities will click, our habits will click, our interests will click, and things will just be pretty easy and smooth because after all, God made them for me. Now, I think there's some confusion here, to be honest with you, because there are plenty of people that maybe you click with on a level of and things are just like smooth or whatever and yet they're non-Christians and yet there are big issues that are like lingering and you're like, well, this is just smooth, right? This is just easy, so it must be from God. This is reading into it in a way that I don't think God gives us confirmation of. He doesn't say, oh, when you find the one, everything will be easy and smooth and that's your sign that it's great, right? This is the right person. No, I don't think so. Not at all. The truth is there are a lot of different things that form us into the people that we are. Our habits, our personalities, our interests, the way we connect with people. And obviously you want that initial chemistry, right? That attraction and then the chemistry just personality-wise. But that isn't to say that your personalities won't clash at times. And that doesn't mean that it's a sign from God that this isn't meant to be. It just means that relationships can sometimes take compromise. They take communication. They take understanding. They take compassion. They take empathy and seeing the other person. Okay, I don't quite understand what you're going through right now. I don't understand your perspective right now, but I'm going to have patience and I'm going to try to understand. I'm trying to communicate with you. And I believe that's all part of the sanctification process of a relationship. That's God growing us closer to himself and growing us in maturity. That's part of it. I just think that, hey, if your relationship and your partner, it was just smooth sailing all the way through, right? How much would you grow? You wouldn't grow that much. Like if they were exactly like you, well, that might have problems in and of itself. But like if it was totally smooth, it wouldn't grow you at all. And I just don't believe that's God's prescription. I'm not saying you get with somebody that you know is going to be hard because then they'll grow you even more. But even still, it's like, hey, don't take smoothness in the relationship as a sign that everything's great and they're the one. But don't take this idea that there's some hiccups and there's some things you need to communicate over as a sign that, oh, this is just not meant to be. No, relationships are hard and communication is important, and working through these things actually will grow you closer together. Okay, the last piece of advice, and I'm probably going to get some pushback on this, maybe, but people will often say that it's no big deal if you have opposite sex friends, especially when you're in a relationship. They say, it's no big deal. Just make sure, you're not messing around and you'll be fine. Especially secular friends will say this. I just think this is totally bogus. I don't think this is a respectful way of treating your partner either by having opposite sex friends. Like for my wife, if I had like close female friends that I was hanging out with, like that is just not a good look. It's not a good look. And it's not good boundaries being put in place. I think in group scenarios and whatever, group hangouts, like whatever, that's fine. But when you have close personal friends of the opposite sex that you are hanging out with, I think that is just unwise. And so I would just reject that. I would reject that that's not a problem. I would say it is a problem. You need to be more careful and you should value your wife a lot more, because I can tell you as a man too, and knowing my wife and knowing I don't know, like how women perceive it in general. If you're a guy that you think, oh, I can just have these female friends and my wife doesn't care, or my girlfriend doesn't care. She does. And I don't think you're respecting her by just kind of like passing that off as like she's being insecure or she's not, trusting you. No. I think there's a place of saying, you know what, there should be some boundaries put in place and maybe some things need to change. Okay, that's my take. Let me know your take in the comments down below. Until next time, keep following the mission.